Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast with Lloyd Chapman and Bruce Torres. With us today is Jonathan Bonner, running for Congress in Georgia. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here. It's always amazing to talk to you guys. Always great energy, great conversation, and thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you. I want to get everyone up to speed. We wrote you and many other Democrat candidates for Congress coming up in a year and a half, and many have replied, and you did as well. And we quickly had a couple conversations, and now we're recording this to help our audience get to know you. So we're going to ask you a bunch of questions all about you, your candidacy, why you're running, all the great things you want for your district, for Georgia, and for the United States. And at any time, ask us questions because we want to get you and everybody up to speed with how important it is that everybody know the problem with federal contracts intended for small businesses going to big businesses. So your site is Bonner for Congress with the number 4.
Yep.
Who and what are you, and why are you running for Congress?
I'm a Georgia native, born and raised, lived in California a little bit, lived in Texas. Uh, I'm running because I actually can relate to the American people. I understand that right now in this time of turbulence, we're looking for someone that actually knows and feels the pains of what the Americans are. I feel it when insurance deductibles go up. I've lost 2 teeth because I couldn't afford the procedures. I've worn a pair of glasses that only had one leg, so I looked crazy for times at a moments at a time. I know how it feels to sacrifice everything. I've given up football scholarships to take care of my father, who's a disabled vet. I took big boy jobs before where out of nowhere I had to drop everything and I found out I had a son and I moved back from Texas to take care of him and things like that. I understand the sacrifice. I understand the pains of what most Americans feel. Of course, mine's might be a little extreme, but I understand that you need to have someone that's creating this legislation, creating these bills, talking to these big federal contractors and things like that to talk for the people, talk for the American people, talk for the small businesses, the actual small businesses, not a 2,000 employee type business, because that's not a small business. If I can't remember everyone's name, or at least a name to the face, that's not a small business in my
Good
eyes. I
point.
mean,
That's a great point.
so with that being said, I want to represent the people. I want to have them have someone they can relate to and count on and actually be in their community, other than not during election time. I'm going to be there outside of election time. I'm going to be the one screaming and yelling on Fox, CNN, and things like that, fighting for them. And I think right now in our government, we don't have someone that's actually fighting for the small businesses, the small communities, and my district is unrepresented.
Yeah, you know what? There's one reason, by the way, why you should be elected with an overwhelming majority. Your opponent's too old. The guy's too freaking old, right? Now,
Yeah.
if he were a commercial pilot, he would have to retire 14 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy, by the way, that commercial pilots have to retire at 65. We got these people in Congress, they're pushing 100, right? It's crazy. You should be required to, I guess I'll go maybe 75 at the most, but gosh, we should have people in Congress that are going to be 80 years old. They're doing the job. When you're 80, by the way, the average life expectancy of a man is 76. So some guy's running for Congress at 79. He's supposed to have been dead 3 years ago.
I think people don't realize that and how detrimental it is. Recently, the bill that just passed or got through, it was because there was 3 vacant seats. And can you tell me why they were vacant? Because people passed away in office.
Exactly.
And that's unfortunate. I understand life happens and things happen, but when you get to an older age at that point, you should start thinking about the future generations or what happens if I do drop the seat? What is the consequences? And that's one of the
Uh,
consequences.
yeah, someone like you grew up, with cell phones and the internet, stuff like that. Your opponent grew up sending people telegrams, right? So yeah, if nothing else, if everything's equal, he needs to go. You need to come in, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I would imagine also the average age in your district is closer, to you that guy. I'm sure he's a great guy, right?
Yeah.
But would you want some body operating on you that was 80 years old,
Hmm.
No.
right? So yeah, I'm sure I don't know anything about him, but I'm sure he's a great guy. But he's too old. He needs to retire and let someone your age, someone that grew up with technology, uh, represent the people. But uh, when I think about Congress, how long has this guy been in Congress?
20 years or 20 around 24 years.
Oh my God. All right. Well, every year he's been in Congress for 24 years, men have gotten over 95% of all federal contracts. What did he say about that? Oh, nothing? Right? Yeah. Um, I guess I prompted a federal investigation into fraud in federal small business programs in 2002. That was about right around the time he came in, right? And every year that he's been in Congress, billions of dollars in federal small business contracts went to Fortune 500 firms. I bet you can't find, him saying anything about that, right? But yeah, that's my main thing is, we need to get much younger people in Congress, right? And these old people, first of all, I can't imagine trying to be in Congress and go back and talk to my constituents at that age.
It,
That's just like too demanding physically for someone of that age, right? Being in
exactly.
Congress is a tough job. You got to be in good shape to be in Congress, right? You got to, you're working like, gosh, I'm guessing 15 hours a day minimum.
Yeah.
And
And
then
even
coming back to your district, to meet with your constituents. You just can't do that when you're that age. It's just too much to ask of someone that age, right?
his last town hall was in 2009. Uh, and that's unacceptable. I mean,
Yeah.
my district is unrepresented when it comes to actually having someone who's present in our community. I
Hmm.
understand. I don't want to be ageist. I never want to say that, but you are right. You're pointing to the facts of, is he actually in our district? Is he showing up? If you're in our district working your behind up and you're 85 years old, I will have a less, I will have a harder time running against you because I know you're actually trying.
Yeah.
But you're not showing up. You're staying in DC. You're a hidden figure we only see during election time.
I would imagine the reason he's not doing town halls is he's probably tired.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, he's probably tired, but again, he should endorse you and drop out,
And
right?
I think, and then people need to go to your site, Jonathan, because you really well lay out. Would you share for us the top, two, three, four things you want to do for your district?
Of course, one of the main things is help the small businesses. I know seeing your guys' email, your facts, where you guys come from, it points out that we are being misrepresented in the small businesses. My district is very heavily with many, many small businesses, as well as it's an affluent business area with women owners or women business owners. And I want to make sure that with me being in Congress, really pushing that actually getting that business. And I remember Lloyd told me this great phrase I've been saying ever since I've heard it was the trickle up effect. And with that trickling up effect, it's going to spread and help the community, not trickle down from give the rich the money and comes down. It never makes it down. So I believe give it to
Yeah.
the smaller, let it disperse, give it, and we can actually do more with that. Uh,
What's your district and what are the towns in your district and the counties that it cuts through?
My district is 13. That is Clayton County, Henry County, Newton, Rockdale, Gwinnett, as well as DeKalb. Great counties, really, really diverse.
Hmm.
I love Georgia. I love Atlanta being on the outskirts of the metro.
Hmm.
It's full of businesses. It's full of a multitude of cultures and things like that. I'm learning Spanish. Yo aprendido español because there's a big affluent Hispanic or culture or diversity in there. So I want to make sure that my constituents actually understand that I understand them and
Hmm.
I am on their level. So I'm very big on that, and I want to
Hmm.
make sure that people feel represented.
What would you say are your personal qualifications or experience to do the job of a representative, of a congressman, of a legislator in the House?
I would say I'm a hard worker. I work for a global tech company as a project manager, so overseeing millions of dollars is kind of small change to me. I understand being fair as well as just seeing a broad overview. Another thing is I know my constituents. I know them. I know how it is, and I know how to fight. I don't like to lay down. I fight tooth and nail, as well as being transparent with them and communicating with that. That's
Hmm.
another thing we lack in government as well as in Congress.
Hmm.
And with that, my last thing I would say is, uh, hmm, there's many things. I'm trying to think of what's the top of the line. Um,
For me, you're pro small business.
yeah, that again,
That's the big thing, of course, to me, but you're pro small business. 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small businesses. I'm sure your district is the same. They create 90% of all net new jobs. So having a pro small business man in Congress would be very good for your district and quite frankly for the whole country. We need more pro small business people like you, Jonathan.
no, and I understand having small businesses boosts up my community, makes it much stronger, much more powerful. With that being said, I want to make small businesses a staple in my district where we could really push for these federal contracts as well as just throughout Georgia. We have too much damn space not to, and too much hustler mentality not not to chase after it. So that's my understanding of why I would be best for my district. And yeah.
That sounds great.
Hmm.
That sounds perfect. I think that most of the Democrats running for Congress should try to educate the constituents to the small business data. That's all U.S. Census Bureau data, but no one seems to know the 99.9% of all U.S. firms, right? 98% of all U.S. firms have 100 employees or less. 87% have 20 or less, and the average American business has 10 employees. Nobody knows that, right? And the only agency to help small businesses is the Small Business Administration, and that agency's budget has never been lower than it is today. And I hope to see pro small business people like you in Congress and
Hmm.
it's be a budget that's appropriate for the agency to represent 99.9% of U.S. firms. I was talking about this yesterday to somebody. USAID was a federal agency to help foreign countries. That was this whole mission. It had a $50 million budget, but the agency to help the Americans is less than 1 billion. So we were giving 50 times more money to help foreign countries than we were to help American companies. I think that's
We
just
were giving them 50 billion, you're saying?
USAID's annual budget was 50 billion. I'm sure they're doing a lot of
Right.
great work. I don't really,
Right.
I'm not saying, don't give them the money, but I'm saying if you're given 50 billion to help foreign countries,
Right.
you should give, 500 billion to help, American companies, right?
Oh
But
gosh, yeah.
I think Trump has cut the SBA budget to the lowest point in the history of America, right? So yeah, Trump's anti-small business. Oh, Jonathan, here's something I was wanting to tell you. Make America great again, right? When was again? When was again? Would it be great if there was a surplus and not a deficit? That'd be good. How about economy was booming? How about no wars? That was the Clinton administration. When Bill Clinton left office, he had a surplus, the economy was roaring, and there was no wars. So all these MAGA guys, what they're really championing is, oh, let's get back to the Bill Clinton administration. Yeah, but yeah, when they say "Make America Great," I always ask them, what was again in your perspective? Actually, trick them, and I go, would you say what we're trying to do is get back to a surplus, not a deficit? Oh yeah, yeah. Would you say we're trying to get to a point where the economy was booming? Oh yeah, and no wars. Okay, that was Bill Clinton's administration, right? But that's true. That's all
No,
true, right? That's factual. But by the way, Clinton was super pro small business. Trump is anti small business. When you go back and look, I'll say in the last even 50 years, a president that was pro small business, the economy was strong. And a president that's anti small business, the economy is weak, like now.
yeah.
So we have the most anti small business president in my lifetime. And I'm not an economist, but it looks to me like we're not doing so great. All the experts are predicting a recession, and was it uh, Walmart's raising their prices, right? But I think the impact of the tariffs is going to hit heavy. I would
Oh,
say summer.
No, it definitely is. And I always tell people you put a business tycoon, a person that only sees big business, only big money, doesn't think about the small person in the most important position of the United States. Of course, they're not going to think about the small businesses. And of course, they're going to try to make their business friends or their cabinet more rich. And unfortunately, I'm here to fight for them. I want to call them out on, to be honest, their bullshit. I want transparency of where our contracts are going. Is it really small businesses or is it something where it's, oh, it's a small business? How many people will work there? 2,000?
I got
50?
something for you on transparency.
What?
Um, I've been suing the government for 40 years. I won a record 110 legal victories. My win ratio is 98.5%, which is impossible. But a few years ago, the Pentagon came out and said they gave small business 23% of all federal contracts. I said, that's great. Can I see who you gave them to? By the way, anyone that wants to know about this can just Google Fortune 500 firms getting federal small business contracts. There's, 100 stories. So the Pentagon says we're doing great with small business. And can I see who they gave contracts to? By the way, I spent 7 years in court, 900,000 legal fees, and I won. And this is what I got. So if you want to see who's getting small business contracts in America, if you got 7 years and 900 grand, you can get you can get this right.
And for
Yeah,
audio
yeah.
listeners, Lloyd
I've got
is
I've got
Lloyd.
lots of
Lloyd,
this.
I just want to tell audio listeners you just held up 7 or 8 pages of
Tiny black pages.
completely redacted, blacked out blocks of redacted information. In other words, you can't see the companies we say are small businesses. Why? Because they're not small businesses.
Now, um, back in gosh, was it 2002? I prompted the first federal investigation into fraud, failed small business programs. And the SBA had a database of small businesses that federal purchasing officers, relied upon. It was called ProNet. And I gave enough information to the Government Accountability Office that they did an investigation. They found 5,320 of the biggest companies on earth in the SBA's database of small businesses, right? Every Fortune 500 firm was in there, right? Every Fortune 1000 firm was in there, right? And to some degree, it's still going on today.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need pro small business people in Congress like Jonathan to finally give the Small Business Administration the budget be appropriate for the only agency to represent the 99.9% of all U.S. firms, the 34 million small businesses where most Americans work, right? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and like I said, I don't know the guy that you're running against, but I know that he's done nothing about it since he's been in Congress about fraud and failed small business programs. I know he's never said anything about the fact that women are getting, cheated. Women are half the population. They own 42% of businesses. They've never gotten even 5% of the contracts, right? But yeah, we need people like you to change that. If I were you, I'd focus on that with your constituents because half of them are women.
Yeah.
And my guess is that when you tell them that every year of your life, companies owned by men have gotten over 95% of federal spending, that'd be the first time they ever heard that.
Yeah.
Okay. And you got minorities in your district. Minorities are 40% of the national population, 40%. They're getting 5% of the contracts. So under Trump, the goal for women is only five. The goal for minority owned is only five. Doesn't that mean that companies owned by white guys are getting 90% of the contracts?
Yeah.
Right? Does my math hold up there, right? Yeah. 5% women, 5% minorities. That means white guys are getting 90% of the contracts, right? You know what? If they want to pay 90% of income tax, I'll go for that, right?
Hmm.
But they don't want to do that, right? So, yeah, we need some drastic changes. And pro small business people like you, we need them desperately to straighten this stuff out and boost our economy.
No, I totally agree. I want to keep on pushing that narrative. Ever since your email and talking with you guys, I have been a madman speaking about this, and I always bring that what is a small business in your eye? And they say maybe like 100 people, 50 people. I said, what do you think the government sees? And they think like 100 at most. I said, no, it's 2,000, and their
Exactly.
eyes just erupt. Like, what do you mean? I'm like,
Exactly. It's
when
actually worse than that. Um, I haven't seen it lately, but the last time I saw I guess 10 years ago, a list of firms getting federal small business contracts. It was Fortune 500 firms and the subsidiaries of Fortune 500 firms. I remember around 2015, I think, the largest recipient of federal small business contracts was a subsidiary of Verizon, right?
Right.
Terramark, I think is what it was. But anyway, yeah, it's just it's so bad for our country, so bad for our economy. Um, if
And it should be mentioned that officially the government and the SBA tells a different story. They'll
oh
tell
yeah,
you, oh, our definition of a small business is up to 500. And
yeah,
oh, we meet or exceed the
yeah,
annual requirement of 23% of federal contracts going to. That's why people have to go to our site, asbl.com,
yeah,
click around, find the documentation, find the stories, find the PDFs, find the congressional investigations, find the reports from the Office of Inspector General at the SBA to verify what everyone is seeing and hearing today and elect someone like Jonathan and run for office yourself to clean house because of all the issues where the rubber hits the road. This is the one that is ripping us off. This is the one that is depressing valuations and the economy in every one of our neighborhoods, towns, cities, and communities. And this is the one that has a remedy at
yeah.
our fingertips that would not cost one extra dollar of federal expenditures to clean house, turn around, and we would adore the honest people like Jonathan who would say, we have to make sure that the law is enforced, that 23% of all federal contracts go to legitimate small
Yeah.
businesses.
Jonathan, I think it's important that you make sure your constituents understand that the Small Business Act that mandates 23% of all federal contracts go to small businesses is an economic stimulus program for all Americans. So if your company, isn't like if you have a barber shop or a floor shop and you can't get government contracts, it's that's okay because the Small Business Act is an economic stimulus program to funnel billions of dollars in federal contracts and federal spending into the middle class and the communities around the country. If the government were to actually comply with the law and give legitimate small businesses 23% of all federal contracts, that would be close to $350 billion a year.
In
That would
new business,
oh,
with
that would
which and
create
for which
billions.
small businesses would have to create 2 million new jobs every year to perform that work. But because all that business goes to big businesses, they're big businesses. They don't create one new job. So if you're a florist or a barber and all your community is thriving with this influx of new business and new jobs, that's a lot more heads to cut and a lot more flowers to buy.
Now, about 15 years ago, the Kauffman Foundation put out a report that basically said that Fortune 500 firms haven't created one net new job in over 40 years. And the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, which does investigations for Congress, they came out with a report in 2023 that said that 34% of the largest, most profitable companies in America pay zero federal income tax. Zero. So if there's a, uh, a lady in your district that has a small flower shop, she's paying more income tax than hundreds of Fortune 500 firms, right? But people don't know that. We need to do something with tax laws where they close all these loopholes, right? By the way, you mentioned something that stuck in the back of my head about Trump. People don't know that Trump's got 13 billionaires in his cabinet. 13 billionaires. How do you think these guys became billionaires? Being civil rights activists, small business activists, right? No, right? So yeah, in fact, I would say, billionaires are probably anti-small business, right? But yeah, so Trump's got 13 billionaires in his cabinet. I can't imagine these Trump people. They had a Trump rally not too far from my house here out in Coachella about a year or so ago. And Trump's, these MAGA people, they're carpenters, they're middle class people, they're firemen, people like that. They don't realize he's a billionaire with a cabinet of billionaires that they don't give a shit about you. They don't care about you. You don't become a billionaire by caring about the middle class, right? And worrying about, Social Security and Medicare and small businesses, right? There's no money in that, right? Trust me. So yeah, Trump's did not become billionaires by caring about middle class America.
And I always tell people even with that, coming from the South, you first things my grandma taught me was don't trust a politician and don't trust a rich man or a billionaire. And with that being said, like you said, no billionaire can relate to you. I don't care who they are. I don't care where they came from. They can't relate to you because the money will never equivalent to how much you hard work you do. They wake up, they don't have to work. Their great, 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 great grandkids will never have to work and
Right.
continually going forward. But we need to really address the elephant in the room. Why are we letting these big corporate back cabinet make these decisions that are going to affect not only in the right now, but 10 years down the road, they're still going to be making money. They're still going to get these tax breaks and things like that. Yet the middle class is still going to drop smaller and smaller because it's getting harder for us to really survive. I mean, affordable housing, insurance, buying a home. I mean, I'm 30. It's hard. You have to have two strong household owners. God forbid if your wife wants to have a kid and wants to stay home. That's a lot. And no one in Congress right now, 2% of Congress comes from the working class. They could
Yeah.
not tell me the last time they've struggled where they went check to check or they couldn't afford a procedure or they know someone that couldn't even pay rent and things like that or buy a home and they've worked their ass off. They've gone to school, they've done the American dream, they've done what was needed to what was told to them. And look, they're not making it. We need to call
Yeah.
that out and we need to
Yeah.
have people there.
We need to encourage you, Jonathan, to keep road testing these ideas and really mix in with all the most because you've got to investigate what do your constituents care about. You've got to talk about that. And if they're not talking about real tangible stuff related to small businesses, that's your chance to educate them. So that's why town halls, anything where you can have a conversation and dialogue, they get to know
Yeah.
you, you get to know them. You have enough time between now and next year. We've reached a length of this episode that's more or less our target. I want to give both of you, we'll start with Jonathan, our guest on our show. What would you tell us, or what would you ask us, or flesh out, or even just speculate about everything we've talked about so far.
Um, I need advice. What would you do as your first month or first thing you do as a congressman? What would you go for?
Gosh, as the president of American Small Business League, I'd want to give the SBA a budget 10 times bigger than it is, right? But yeah, I'd want to make sure that we do things that are fair. Just be fair, be reasonable and logical. Is it reasonable and logical to give 95% of all federal spending to companies owned by men? No, that's not reasonable. That's not logical. Is it reasonable, logical to only give minorities 5% and they're 40% of the population? No, that's not reasonable. That's not logical, right? That was just two common sense things. The Senate did a study of 15 years ago that said for every 1% contracts of small business go up, it creates 100,000 net new jobs. So if we just gave small businesses the full 23% that they should get under the law, they're only getting about three now. That would double the number of new jobs in America, double. That's a 100% increase in net new jobs for free. No new taxes, no new spending, deficit neutral. Be the most productive economic stimulus program in history, and it's free. But that's the kind of thing that you should think about. I thought something funny. Did you say you're 30?
Hmm?
Your opponent's 50 years older than you are.
Yeah.
Oh my God. He's 50 years older than you are. He's half a century older than you.
Yeah.
He needs to go.
I would enjoy listening to a candidate and also a representative who taught me and talked about what you face on the job. The more that you could be a student of a seat in the House and relate that realistically to me as your potential voter, you would remind me of John F. Kennedy. I've studied his campaigns extensively, President Kennedy back in the 1960s. And one of the joys of appreciating him was the conviction that he's leveling with me. He talked about the limits on the office of the presidency. He talked about the limits of the Constitution. He talked in ways that we haven't heard in 60 years. And that's why he was beloved of his time and sorely missed. So things like that.
Yep. Yep. Well, Jonathan, anything we can do to help you, let us know. We need people like you. We need people like you in Congress. We need honest people like you that care about small business, the middle class, women, minorities, and help us get our economy back on track. We're not doing so good right now, right? We need some pro small business legislation, some pro small business policies, and educate your constituents. You
Of
know,
course.
on the Census Bureau data, the 99.9, the 98, right? Let them know how important small business are. And again, I would imagine that your opponent has done nothing. And every day he's done nothing. Been there 20 years, he's done nothing, right? So yeah, he needs to go.
I agree. It's time for new blood and for someone to actually fight for small businesses and fight for the working class. I really
Absolutely. That's
on
what
the
America is. America is the middle class and the working class, the working man. That's what America is. We need people like you to represent them across the country.
thank you, thank you.
All righty, Jonathan. On behalf of Lloyd and myself, I want to thank you very much for being with us. And I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.